Welcome to the first episode of Rice and Beans. This is your host. I'm Richard.
Charles.
And our first episode, what we're going to talk about?
I think we're going to talk about pair programming
Pair
today.
programming. So we're going to start our first one on pair programming. What is pair programming?
Pair programming is probably one of the most controversial topics that you could bring up to any engineer. No, seriously, pair programming, my definition of it is not an engineer. It could be two people that sit together and work on one piece of code, or work on coding together, or work on building something together.
So you're talking about two people sitting together. Are they using the same computer, using the same one keyboard, or you know?
Usually one person is driving, the other person is observing, but it's not observing like just sitting there and like, oh, there it is. It's an active observation. It's the, hey, I'm writing out this method. What do we think about doing this method? The person in the back might be thinking, oh, this method should be doing this action, and maybe it should account for this.
So like a backseat driver.
Very much so, like a backseat driver, which is, I think, one of the reasons why it annoys some programmers.
So pair programming is not Scrum.
No.
So it's an XP practice.
Yeah, it's a you mentioned earlier. Was it a principle?
It's one of the practices and principles of XP.
Really?
Right. And this is something that, for me, well, when I'm coaching teams, it's one of the practices that I recommend without even thinking.
Why do you recommend it?
So to me, it's a couple of things that it tries to handle. It's just good practice, I think, to have two people looking at it, just looking at code, learning from each other.
What is so you and I have been doing this for a long time. What's the very common response to pair programming?
Oh, so I remember the experiment that I ran, and I had a team that absolutely opposes pair programming. The first thing that came to me was, this is inefficient. We're not using the best time, I guess.
Yeah.
Using time correctly, because we've got two people, we should be splitting tasks instead of just, working on the same thing.
Yeah.
Right? And it was so hard to have that conversation to say why you would want to do it.
And I'm going to play the devil's advocate. I could kind of see where they're coming from. From an engineer's perspective, they want to write code.
Right.
They want to write code. They want to be productive. In fact, I've noticed that when an engineer is sitting not doing anything, they start to get really uncomfortable and like, oh no, I need to be writing code. Right. So when an engineer tells me that, oh, I need to be writing code, I need to be getting active, I can kind of empathize with what they're going through. It's like, okay, I understand where you're coming from with that.
Yeah, I empathize with them. I think one of the things that I try to let them know is that it's not about doing the work. It's about doing it in a more efficient, more effective way, right? So, we all have this saying that, two minds is better than one.
Yes.
Right? When we put our minds together with two people, we tend to come up with much better things. So that's one of the things I kind of encourage people to do is that, what if the both of you come together and work on it? The other part is learning from each other, not just teaching.
Yes.
Right? You're not just, well, I know my stuff, there's nothing for me to learn. But wait a minute, what if you were the one that's teaching?
Agreed. I think that the learning aspect is one of the benefits that it gets really overlooked. Is you have your style, you have your way of doing things, but when you're paired up with someone, they introduce a new style, and they may make suggestions that you never would have thought of, or that you would have heard later on down the path, maybe in a pull request or in a code review. But right there, you're paired up, boom, instant feedback.
And I remember, when that incident happened, when a team doesn't respond to it, and the only way to get where they're willing to try it out is usually when they have a new person that joined the team, and technically they're not as good. For example, maybe a junior developer, and then you have a senior developer that usually pair with them and help them out.
Yep.
Right. And what's interesting to watch is that they kind of just the start of it. You start with those two people, and the habit doesn't go away. They kind of build that bond almost, right? They're a pair, they're working as a team, and they continue on with that. And that's kind of grew. And then that's usually the biggest challenge that I have is getting teams to do that. And that's usually where I would start them with. I say, okay, let's try this first, just doing that. And I'll let the team experiment. Where do they think that they want to use it? And the other part is, I would say, example is if there's a very difficult task to do, very difficult programming thing to do, right?
Like a complex story,
complex
perhaps.
story,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that one of the things that we've suggested prior, because when we were talking about engineers pairing up, one of the times where I've seen pairing really work effectively, one of them, yes, the complex story, but it doesn't necessarily have to be engineer with engineer.
Right.
I think that the most effective cases of pairing up I've seen it's an engineer and a QA or automation person.
Right, and I assume that'll be the upfront, right? They're now sitting down, trying to figure out, testing tasks, for example. Maybe they're learning how to write tests.
Yep.
How to proper test something, and then you have this QA person or test engineer help them do that.
Yep.
And then at the same time, test engineer is now gaining the knowledge to do automation, to write automation tests.
I mean, you think of it, the engineer is building out the code, or they're going through a story. The test engineer could be sitting behind looking at the acceptance criteria. If you got good acceptance criteria, essentially those can be your tests right there.
Right.
So then we're diving into something like test-driven kind of deal. But you're pairing those two up, and why not write your QA test or why not write your automation test while you're writing the code? Pairing those two up. That's one of the examples of an effective pairing.
So we talk about the fact that it allows us to share knowledge, right? What else is there?
Share knowledge. I mean, honestly, the feedback, and I mean by feedback for usually in a development process, you wait until you put a PR request out or a code review, and then people will look through a giant chunk of code. As opposed to like, hey, we're writing the code right now. I'm actually seeing it, and I can ask the questions as something pops up. And I was like, well, how come we're doing that? I don't understand.
So code review. So now, if you think about the process, if you say, okay, let's say a linear process, a sequential work, right?
Yep.
Even though sequential, but if we break it down sequential, saying I write the code, then I'm going to send it to somebody to have a code review.
Yep.
And that's a long process, and that's very typical.
Yep.
And it's okay to have that, but if you are doing pair programming, right there and then, that can already happen. So you can do code review at the same time as you're writing code, because somebody's reviewing it as you're going.
Yep.
So that could potentially save the extra step that behind it. I mean, it's like, no, I don't need to have somebody else do that anymore.
Going back to the example of like a complex story. Complex story, I mean, doesn't necessarily equate to a lot of code.
Right.
But sometimes it leads to complex kind of code.
Right.
So wouldn't you rather be getting that feedback as you're writing that complex code as opposed to dishing it on someone like, okay, now try to figure this thing out?
Right, you wait, the feedback loop is longer, right?
Yep.
You wait for it to come back. Okay. So what are some of the misconceptions of pair programming?
We hit one of them, which is it's inefficient. So the common thing is that, like you mentioned earlier, let's say you're writing code and I'm paired with you, and then I'm not really doing anything.
Right.
Granted, I agree. I could be writing code too.
Right.
But at the end of what we lose up front because we're paired up, we gain at the end because the review process goes a lot quicker. Should go a lot quicker when you've got two people. So the code review, the PR request, the PR feedback should shorten.
Right.
Because you've had somebody already looking at it that can say, yeah, listen, we worked on this together, here it is.
So there's a misconception that it takes a little more, you're not efficient.
Right.
But in reality, I think it's more effective. And potentially it is more efficient because it's cleaner code going in, so you don't need extra time to fix bugs.
Yeah.
Because you're reviewing it and everything that it goes, right?
Yep.
The other part is, I think goes back to one or more of the, I would say, benefit of it is the buzz factor. You got two people knowing the code base.
Oh, well, yeah.
One person get hit by the bus. Not that I'm telling people to get hit by the bus, but
don't jump in front of buses.
Right, don't jump in front of the bus. But what if it happens? Now you have somebody else that also know it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you exactly. It's the the knowledge is not now contained to just one person.
Right.
And people can say, well, we gain knowledge by doing the review or the code review. I don't think so, because when you're doing the code review, you're just looking at structure, you're trying to figure things out. You're not really into the business
Right.
case and the problem that you're trying to solve.
So are there barriers? Are there barriers to pair programming? Let's talk about barriers to pair programming.
Well, it has gotten such a, in the developer community, there's a lot of developers that are really just really against it. It's almost sometimes like a bad word. It's like, I don't want to pair program, it's a waste of time, and I don't want to. But I mean, I don't know if a barrier, could you say?
Well, could it be personality?
Yes.
There's conflict of personality.
So I myself, so I'm going to put myself out here full transparency, I would feel very uncomfortable writing code in front of somebody else. Just the way that maybe because I come from back in the day of writing code in an office somewhere.
Wait a minute. You are not comfortable. You're telling people to do pair programming.
I'm not. So this is where I come in. I'm the devil's advocate in this. I understand where they're coming from.
Yes.
There is a certain amount of anxiety, and for me, it's the having someone over my shoulder looking at code that I'm writing.
The effect of that. Right?
Yes. Like that to me would make me extremely nervous.
So that's one of the things that when people write down, it's like, don't stand behind somebody. Please do not stand behind me. Right? I don't like it. Now you can stand beside me, just don't stand behind me.
So all those times that I crept up behind.
Oh yeah, that freaks me out, right? So no, just if you are beside me, and I'm fine. If you're beside me, it's okay. And that's one of those things. If we have a big screen going on and we are looking at the screen and working together, I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Right. But if you have somebody, you don't want somebody behind you just looking like that.
Right.
Right? You don't want that.
Yep.
You're looking on your shoulders, and that's not comfortable. So there are certain things to learn about the proper way of doing pair programming.
What would make me, so for example, if somebody asked me, God forbid somebody had to pair program with me today, because it would be atrocious. But if somebody asked me, hey, we want you to pair program, I would, with my pair, I would set up like an agreement, like, look, this is what we should do.
Oh, I like that, yeah.
Like, maybe hey, look, I don't want somebody just staring at code. Maybe you have a laptop open and maybe you write unit tests as I'm coding the method.
Yeah, that's right.
So more of an active approach as opposed to just, that feeling of having somebody looming and looking over you. So setting it like a working agreement, like, hey, we're going to try this.
Right.
I don't like the looking over the shoulder. We're going to do unit tests. Maybe if it's with an automation engineer, write your test and we'll run those tests right now.
So my biggest pet peeve is this: don't put food near my keyboard.
If you have to put that in there, you must.
So especially, for me, especially one thing, I can't stand people putting bananas near the keyboard. Don't know why, but it's just something's my pet peeve.
Sounds like we need to have an episode on what this is all about.
So things like that, right? So some people just don't like that, or general hygiene and things like that.
Oh my God, yes. But I think that maybe to work yourself out of the anxiety of doing it is set up a working agreement with whoever you're pairing up with, and start there. Granted, it would help me out if I knew what we were doing and we established like this is our game plan, and it would make me feel more comfortable with it. Or talk about what objectives you want to get out of this. Say, you know what, we want to try pair programming. Maybe we experiment and time ourselves. See how we do. Maybe we see if we are being less efficient.
So one of
or more efficient.
So an advice, I think, a potential thing to try. If you have a team, they're trying to get them to do pair programming, and if they do not want to do pair programming, that's something for you to try. I would say give them the extreme. Take them to mob programming first. That's an extreme, but out of mob programming, I think there are lessons learned from there. They say, this is valuable if we were to pair.
So for those who don't know what mob programming is.
So mob programming is basically now you're taking the whole team, one keyboard, one monitor, all working on the same thing. And go look it up on, Google it, what's called mob programming. There are some rules behind it. I have experimented with it. There are some things we walk away from that I think is great things where the team walk away and say, hey, you know what? This is an extreme. I can't do mob, but I can see the value of pair programming.
Yeah.
Right. So there's some things if you take it to an extreme, it's almost like negotiation.
Little by little, and that's
I'm haggling.
and that's the reality that we as coaches we can't demand that a team be
Right.
pair programming. It's we have to sell the idea.
Yeah.
And we find different ways in making suggestions, and we've had our experiences where we get shut down up front, and we're like, okay, you don't want to do that. I understand.
Right.
We'll ask the questions. Well, why? And we've actually repeated some of the answers we've heard over the years, and then we start suggesting things. Hey, mob programming. Have you read this? Share materials. Find opportunities to. You and I talk about the push-pull method. You kind of give a suggestion and then wait for them to say, we want to give this a try, or you know what, maybe we will look at it.
Right.
And then what you're looking for is that one or two that end up trying it, and hopefully you get a good success story. And once one pair tries it and they start sharing it with the rest of the teams, you'll start to notice that all the others are like, you know what, we're willing to try it. We're willing to give it a chance. Right. But from a coach perspective, is all we can do is suggest like, hey, this is a good practice. Give it a try. It's not easy, but the reality is that nothing good comes easy, and there's a lot of benefits that come along with it, and there's also a lot of challenges that come along with it.
So another trick out there is to find yourself a champion. So find somebody, and sometimes we talk about the push versus pull.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can have a peer developer that you can work with to help you push.
Yep.
As a coach, we can't push, right? But if you can get a peer, a developer, a lead, for example, that pushes for it, and that can help change some of the mindset as well.
I mean, I think that goes with any kind of change. Is usually when change is suggested from a peer, the teams will immediately take it yeah, that sounds like a good idea. When it comes from a coach and sometimes a manager or a leader, the team will tend to be like, yeah, whatever, whatever, guy, we're good.
So I think that's a good first session.
I don't think it's going to be a popular one amongst the developers, but I think that honestly, I think that one of the things that we always used to do on your channel, and that we're going to encourage folks on this one, is I know that a lot of you who are watching this have had experiences with pair programming, good, bad, ugly, and we want to encourage you, please post comments, tell us about your experiences. If you've tried something a technique that you say this is actually really good, please let us know. We're sharing our experiences in the hopes to build that feedback loop to hear from the community and hear from everyone else.
Awesome.
And I couldn't think of a better topic to try to elicit some feedback than pair programming.
So I think
good choice.
I think that's a good wrap up for this topic.
Yeah.
So that's our first one. Hope you enjoy it. Please subscribe for more. This is Richard.
Charles.
Thank you for watching Rice and Beans.
First one in the bag.